Hi, you guys. Welcome to another special episode of Real Talk Friends. Our special guest with us is Susan Easton Black.
The legend.
The legend. She is here.
The woman.
I know. We are so grateful, Susan, that you are here. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I am so grateful because I've been a huge fan and admirer for a long time.
Yeah.
And I think the timing of this conversation is just providential. Is that the best way to say it?
I
God
love that,
made
yeah.
sure this was going to happen. Hopefully you'll be able to view this with your friends and family before conference starts, because I feel like we have the expert on talking about all things restoration. And that was the invitation for conference this year, is that we really study and prepare for conference by understanding the restoration. So thank you, Susan, for being here.
Oh, you're
I
welcome.
know, and as I've thought about this, I've been thinking about, okay, how much Susan Easton Black has been in my life.
Yes.
And I was thinking about it. She wrote that amazing book about the Book of Mormon, where she went through and did, where we all just think, oh yeah, Christ is mentioned every 1.3 or 5 verses throughout the Book of Mormon, and we get all of that information. And when I went through seminary, I believe you wrote that in the late 80s.
Right.
I go through seminary in the 90s and learn all of this content, and now I'm teaching it as a seminary teacher. And I just think so much of what you have uncovered and discovered is ingrained in our culture at this point. I don't think people realize that you're the one who's brought all this out and helped us understand the scriptures in a way that has been really beautiful. And so anyway, I just had to say, Susan's been really involved in the cultural shift of President Benson flooding the earth with the Book of Mormon, and you kind of giving us this sense of here's why. Because we can discover a Savior in there that is so wonderful and beautiful. So anyway, thank you for doing that.
And I would add to that, really framing conversations around Joseph Smith and Emma, and now Hyrum, right? And
Right.
so, and I feel like that is so timely that we have a conversation with someone that kind of knows these characters of the Restoration in such a personal way. I've heard you speak before, and you've talked about how they've become personal. Joseph is a personal friend for you after all these years. Is that too far to say that?
Well, perhaps. I certainly know Joseph's a prophet. We live at a time where people are saying they're leaving the church because of Joseph. And they say they have so many questions. And I'm staying because I found so many answers.
And you know
what?
what?
He is a prophet.
And that's exactly when we were talking about preparing for this conversation with you, that I felt like the naysayers, I'm praying they tune in, because you do have this firm testimony that Joseph is and was a prophet. Where did you wrestle, or did you ever wrestle with that? Or was it always from the beginning that you just knew?
I think for me it began as a child. Maybe we're all there, but I was fortunate enough to live in a home where my grandmother lived with me. And she had left school at 8th grade. And with that, I'd say, Grandma, tell me a story. And she'd say, I can only tell you things that are true.
Oh, I love that.
And although I wanted to hear Snow White, Sleeping Beauty, it
Wait,
has
those
to
aren't
end happily
not
ever
true.
after. She wanted to tell me about a prophet that had changed her life. And the impact suddenly from a kid, Liberty Jail was, I just couldn't believe kids in school didn't know about it, So I am grateful for that kind of upbringing, but he's always been, well, it's just been marvelous.
What a great reminder of the power of grandparents, and how, if you in a natural way share your testimony, the impact that it has over generations, because you're carrying that forward, right?
It did for me. And when my grandmother died, I was attending Brigham Young University, and I had a professor named Dr. Milton Backman. And I'm sitting on the back row, reading the newspaper, checking out who's in class, and suddenly he started talking, and he was telling the same stories I had known, but he could tell me where in the library I could find the book that could verify it, and I was hooked.
I love that. Yeah. Do you feel like there's one particular story that you feel was is the thing that you think of the most often? I know that's a horrible question sometimes, especially for someone that is so prolific in telling these stories. But is there a story that, if we have viewers that are like, I don't have a library of stories.
Or where do I start?
Yeah,
where do you start?
Right. Would you start with the first vision, or is there
Definitely start with first vision. I mean, if you know that he was born in Sharon, Vermont, hey, that's great. Or that he had a leg operation, or family moves multiple times before ending up in a town called Palmyra, hey, that's great. But if you know that the first vision did happen and that God the Father and Jesus Christ appeared to Joseph Smith, then all of a sudden you've got a foundation, you've got purpose, you've got something to tell your friends and anybody you run into, saying in a time of turbulence, there's hope.
There's hope.
I love that, finding hope in the story. And so one of the things I was going to that I've been thinking about asking you, Susan, is when, of course, we know that there's multiple accounts of the first vision. There's 4 from Joseph, and I believe we have 5 more that are secondhand accounts. I get a lot of questions about it, and it's not necessarily people trying to disprove the first vision, but more trying to reconcile. Maybe if we could just do Joseph's 4, maybe that's a narrower way of looking at it. What are some things that you've come to understand as you've studied his 4 accounts of the first vision that might help some people that might look at that and say, why are there some details in this that are omitted over here, and so on? What are some of the things you would help to approach those in maybe a faithful way where you can receive a hopeful witness for yourself that you've talked about?
That's a good question.
For me.
That was a long question, so thank you for
No, it was a really good question.
I like long questions.
Yeah, that lets the spirit flood
Does
the
it?
answer. I think it does.
I mean,
Anyway.
you've got accounts 32, 35, 38, 41, and then you have contemporaries, right?
Yeah.
I've heard a lot of people rationalize and come up with theories as to why the different accounts, why are they not all word for word for word. And for me, I like the 1838. I like the one that's been published in the Pearl of Great Price. Of all of those accounts, it's the only one in 1880 where you've got people out there, the congregation at conference is literally going to vote and accept it as scriptures.
So it's the canonized version.
Right, it's the canonized version. These others, it's wonderful to learn some different things about it as you go through, but the one that captures your heart is the one that the church votes, yes, we accept, accept the Pearl of Great Price. As scripture.
I like that answer.
Yeah.
And maybe this is what you were trying to say, don't go down this rabbit hole, but the other answer that I've often given is I tell stories and I write as well and I speak, and there's not a speaking event or a version of telling those stories that are exactly the same, because the Spirit has compelled me to emphasize certain portions of the story. And so Joseph, and then age-wise, if I tell a story at 16, by the time I'm 40, when I looked back on it, I understood things in a different way. Have you found that with Joseph, that you could see his development in that?
So for me, I, like everyone else, needed to come to grips. Is Joseph really a prophet? And I think each one of us go through that. So what I did, and I don't know if everybody else would want to do that, but I found that in gospel doctrine classes, raising my hand and asking questions and being the continual irritant was not the answer for me, right?
Okay.
I thought you were going to say that was exactly what you should do.
Be the gospel doctrine
I was already
irritant.
her fan, but now I'm more fine. Don't be the irritating person in gospel doctrine. Fine.
So I bought myself a journal, and I started writing down all the questions that I had. As the years come and go, every Christmas, I now get out the journal and I'm filling it. And the old statement, you don't throw out the baby with the bathwater, right? You just got to be sure. So I went through and wrote all these questions, and then as I found the answers, I then wrote the answers. And at this point, the questions that I had when I was younger, but mind you, I look the same. Okay, but questions I had when I was younger, yes, right?
I know that. I don't think you
Same
have
here,
aged.
have I changed at all? I mean, really?
No, you haven't.
So the questions I had when I was younger, I'm now, I don't know, I'm between 85, 90%. I now have found the answers and are saying to myself, oh, it's so simple. And I think that some are too quick to search the internet for the quick answer rather than the thoughtful answer.
I love that. I'm just
I know, that is a great.
I love that. Well, no, I just love because it's the pattern of Joseph.
That's what I was
taught in really well in the Joseph Smith history account of the first vision. You chose that, like Joseph, you kind of wrestle with others. And not wrestle as in really, but like just how do I understand this? And it's confusing. And what do you think? And what do you think? And eventually you got to a point where it was like, I just need to go to a low traffic area, as Ganel-Lyn teaches, and just kind of be in a space where I can find those answers.
Yeah, where you're by yourself.
I love that example.
You have a chance to ponder, to think, to pray, and all of a sudden you go, oh, I get it.
Yeah.
So for me, first vision, square one. And then you just start like building blocks.
The foundation on top of that. That's what I was going to add to that, the pattern comment that Scott just made. Did you start to notice about yourself the way in which you did receive answers? Because I think that's the other thing for our viewers and for myself, that the older I've gotten, the more I'm familiar with the voice of the Spirit for me and the way the Lord generally speaks to me. Or were there other resources or patterns that you developed in getting your answers? Would you kind of put it on a shelf and go about your life, and then you would revisit the journal and go, oh, the Lord led me because I happened to have a conversation, or I read this, or I listened to that devotional? What were your sources? Because I think what you just touched on is so important, that, I love my daughter and she's going to watch this, but oftentimes she'll ask me a question and I'll answer it and she'll still Google to me to make sure. And I'm like, listen, a mom is sometimes smarter than Google. So what have you found are your best sources? Is it just strictly the Spirit?
Well, for me, I'm a mass reader. So read. And one of my talents is that I can read and remember what I read. And so you'd say, hey, it's a great talent. Is there a downside? And I go, well, forgiveness is tough for me.
Because you're like,
because I have the recall,
George, on Thursday, 3 years ago, at 4 o'clock.
And
George Durant is her husband, by the way. So
thank you. Yes, I am lucky for that. But so the result is I read, and how I know I nailed it, I'm just going to give an example.
Okay.
I've been a teacher for a long time, and I love the students. When you love the students and love your subject, I mean, what's better than that? And so when I teach something and I learn something myself in class, it's like here's all kinds of bits of knowledge, and suddenly this one matches this one, and boom, and I go, oh, so that's it. And so I always know the Spirit is present when I'm teaching something that, say, I may have taught 20, 30 plus years, and I learn something, and I see the truth for the first time. It's just amazing.
So
it's
new
like
understanding, and the Spirit keeps it simple. I think that's what I've said before on the show, that don't go get in the weeds, because then the Spirit's like, well, there's no room for me. You're making it so complicated.
Okay, let me describe I retired from BYU, mission, became serial missionary, actually.
Wait, real quick, where have you served?
So I've actually served quite a few missions now. But I've been a psychologist for the LDS Social Service, and then a missionary to the Nauvoo Temple,
which is the greatest gig ever.
Actually, yes. And then missionary to St. George Temple Visitor Center, where you have all the sites. And then, I've been a missionary to the priesthood and family part, and then I've been a writing missionary for the church historic sites. I mean, it's just done. But okay, I wanted to feature on my experience in St. George at the Brigham Young House. And at the Brigham Young House, that will pull it all together, water was very difficult to get in St. George. And so you see the table all set, and then we would say, I'm sure it's no longer in the script today, and no doubt I got it from a missionary that got it from so-and-so, right?
Yeah, for sure.
The hearsay.
But they would say, well, you know, down here, once you would eat, water's so precious, you'd lick the platter clean. And we've all kind of heard that. But then they had a big tub in his kitchen. And the first thing they do, they put in water, and then they'd wash the dishes. They'd take the dishes out, and then they'd wash the clothes. They'd take the dishes out, and then they'd wash the baby. And then they hopefully would take the baby out, and then they would take this pan and they would put it out on their like trees. They had a lot of nut trees that grew down there. But then they would say, we really originated, although I'm sure it's not right, but don't throw the baby out with the bath water. And I think some people today are saying, wait a minute, we're throwing out the whole thing.
The whole thing because one part.
They see one part, and I'm like, it's because you don't understand the one part.
I love that. I'd love to kind of go a little further into Emma and Joseph, because I think that really is one of the other tricky areas. We were talking, I think, on a recent episode that specifically on polygamy, that we have both appreciated the Saints Project because it's just this story. It doesn't commentate, it doesn't politicize, it just says, and sometimes we finish a chapter and we're like, that's it? We're not gonna, okay, we just kind of dove into the deep end there and now we're on to the next chapter. And I've appreciated that this is just our history and it's one version of that, but it doesn't seem to me in this project that the tougher, stickier subjects have been avoided, specifically some of the dynamics with Emma. And I'm a huge Emma fan, and there's a lot of critics of Emma out there, and I just am always a little surprised because I think we have a side hobby in our culture right now of commentating on everyone's life and saying, you know, well, why is she doing that? And I would do that if I was him. And so no wonder we look back on history and do the same thing, because we're doing it on Twitter and Facebook every day to each other.
Real time.
Yeah, real time. We're like looking at each other's lives saying, well, we think we know this, and why is their marriage like that? And why are they doing this? What are your feelings about Emma and some of the stickier topics?
There was a time that I could join everyone in comments about Emma.
In a critical way?
In a critical way. But then remember, I'm reading. One of the things I read about Emma was her patriarchal blessing. And suddenly I went, whoa. And the reason is because, and I've actually had a reason to read several patriarchal blessings of the early saints. But why Emma stood out to me is that there is no if. And you think about it, I mean, in mine, the patriarch's going if.
Yeah, everywhere. There's dozens of those
Right.
ifs.
All dependent on your worthiness.
Yes, and you know, wondered if the man was stuttering or was it really me, right? Okay, but for Emma, there's no ifs, and it ends with, you will be saved in the kingdom of heaven, even so, amen. Wow. And just that. So whatever I might say, one of my favorite sayings that Joseph said was, women, bridle your tongues. And was he really talking to me? And so I've had...
Scott's like, he was talking to Ganel-Lyn.
Yes.
Hey, no, don't you put that in my mouth. I don't believe that for a second.
But as a result, I've learned to be more gentle. And then I've thought, in addition, you know, those sealing ordinances are real. And Joseph loved her, she loved him. But hers is a most interesting story. As it unfolds, she stood 5'9", you know, obviously the envy of me. And she eloped with Joseph, and in so doing, very difficult for her parents.
Yeah.
Alienated.
Right. And then several children that did not survive. You know, most people today don't experience that, you know, that they would die as babies. And then for her to live so long without Joseph. Anyway, you have to really admire her. She was known as the First Lady of Nauvoo, and our first Relief Society president. I mean, she has much going for her.
Well, and I think that's interesting because in the work that I do, I hear of heartbreak and I hear of loss and grief. And sometimes I talk to people that it was literally one loss that becomes the wedge between them and living the gospel or attending church.
Right.
And Emma had multiple layers of grief that she could have had.
Multiple layers of grief.
And loss. And while she also watched multiple miracles happening in those same areas of her pleading for others. And that's always stood out to me as how would I reckon, because I get trapped by that same thinking today where I'll think, okay, Heavenly Father, I've prayed and fasted for that. And my neighbor obviously did, but it already happened for them. And we're on year 20 for me, and it's not happened. And she literally had that, where we have witnesses and accounts of Joseph performing blessings and miracles for families that were the pleadings of her heart as well.
Right.
Yeah.
So Susan, I had a question. As you've studied Emma, and it's one of my favorite questions to really just try and understand someone. It makes them real to me. And I really like this, is as you've studied Emma, what are some of the just gifts, just attributes of Emma that you think really attracted Joseph to her and really helped her to be as resilient as she was? What are some of those gifts and talents that you discovered in Emma that were really this is what made her who she was?
Okay, well, first of all, I think she was beautiful. And well, all right, let me answer by telling a story. There was a time when W.W. Phelps, our man that wrote Spirit of God, Praise to the Man, I mean, he was everything. But he came up to Emma and suggested that she should get for Joseph Smith a table like Napoleon Bonaparte had. And he proceeded to say that Napoleon Bonaparte has a table that will only feed one, and that it could solve all of her people in and out of the house, you know, her coming, staying.
And it's Joseph, right? Joseph's
Right.
the one inviting everyone
Right.
in town.
And so she's always the hostess with the mostess and ready to have anybody, you know, stay, do whatever. And her comment back to Phelps was, my husband is a bigger man than Napoleon Bonaparte, and that he could never eat without his friends. And so
what a generous spirit.
Yes, so amidst
and so accepting.
Right, amidst the tragedy's grief, she still was willing to host and play that role in the life of the family.
Do you think some of that service was part of her healing and grieving? Because we found a lot of times just reaching out even a little bit can really help deal with grief and anxiety, depression, and mental illness and stuff like that. And I'm not saying Emma had any of that, but she definitely had multiple layers of grief through what she'd been through and what she had lost. Right. Do you think maybe some of that was actually kind of healing, giving her a chance to serve others and help other people who might have needed things that the Smith family could give?
Perhaps. I know that Lucy Mack Smith, when she is first meeting Emma, she describes her as she had never known such a compassionate woman, and it seemed to come naturally. I don't think it was something, I've got to do this now.
Because now I'm the prophet's wife.
So,
none of those if I serve, then the grief will lessen, like we sometimes negotiate with God in the gospel.
I think it was, just a part of her daily life.
I love that. I could talk with you for hours about Emma, and I appreciate your witnessing and your honesty that it wasn't always the way you viewed her, because I think that gives permission for other people that have already decided they know, whether it's Joseph or Emma or Hyrum, and that's kind of where I'd like to go. Yeah. Tell us a little bit about your love for Hyrum. I feel like I've always put him in a category of we all need a Hyrum in our lives.
We all do need a Hyrum.
We all need a Hyrum in our lives. And I have a couple of Hyrums, and they don't always get the front cover of the magazine, I would say. But man, oh man,
it's
they're needed. Like, the world doesn't go well without Hyrums.
Right, Nephi and Sam,
exactly.
Jacob, Joseph,
Aaron.
As you go back. Yes.
Yeah.
And so you look at Hyrum. I mean, you've got to admire him, just the fact he is the older brother,
Yeah.
and so willingly turns to assist Joseph. Even from the time of the leg operation, it's when Lucy Mack Smith is feeling kind of overwhelmed and difficult times for her during it, it's Hyrum who steps up. And it's consistently Hyrum who steps up. And if you're looking for two brothers and you're looking for the ultimate relationship and the kindness, and Joseph recognizing, talking about the integrity of Hyrum, and that Hyrum always stands with him, the good, the bad times. At one point, Hyrum said that there's never been a 6-month period that he and Joseph haven't been together.
Wow.
So wherever they've
that.
lived, they just kind of, they're paralleling all the time. And
Wow.
So the Lord in his mercy took them together so they weren't apart?
yeah, well, perhaps, definitely to seal their testimony about the Book of Mormon,
Yeah.
Doctrine and Covenants. But Hyrum, I think he's one of the great unsung heroes of the Restoration. But, Brigham Young would say that it's Joseph. I mean, it's always Joseph.
Yeah.
But Joseph without Hyrum
Is not Joseph.
I always wondered that. It's true.
Because I think when you are the figurehead, the leader, the mouthpiece, right, the toll that takes, the public persona that Joseph had to maintain, and the expectations everyone put on him, not just as a religious leader, but a political leader, right? A civic leader, a military leader, everything.
He's all of the above.
Right. Why are you playing the stick pull game? Because you're the prophet. All that. That relationship, to have someone that knows your heart the way Hyrum knew his why and his heart. What a grounding gift that was.
Right. To know you could have total confidence.
Yes. And trust.
Yes, total trust.
And be who you really were and be loved unconditionally. What a gift.
Yeah, especially trying to carry the burden of prophet. I mean, even though Joseph tried to diffuse the stereotypes that other people would put on him, how they thought he should act and all of that. I mean, even though he seemed to be really good at kind of playfully and sometimes not, just diffusing those situations, to have someone like Hyrum he could really rely on. And maybe that would be my question is for us, because I think, man, I could really be a Hyrum. Like, what are some of the lessons learned from Hyrum you think that are really applicable that we could incorporate that might really make our relationships, like you said, that, what is it, D&C 124, I can't remember where it's near the beginning where it's I, the Lord, love Hyrum because of the integrity of his heart, which I think is so, if
so
the Lord
telling.
said that about me, like that to me is the ultimate compliment. I love him. He has integrity. I just think, but what are some maybe takeaways where you look at Hyrum and say, maybe if we incorporated some of these characteristics of Hyrum in our lives, it would really probably make our relationships a lot deeper.
Okay. For me, Hyrum is the family man. He's the go-to for the family. I mean, you could have lots of kids in the family, but who do you go to because they get the job done, kind of like. And I see Hyrum in a role, when his brother Alvin dies, he steps up as the oldest son and helps the parents, and his job is to complete that beautiful house there in Palmyra, right on Stafford Road. So he does that, and then you get different times as they're starting to move on to Ohio. You get Joseph writing him saying, I need you to come, but when you do, be sure and go pick up Dad. You get, he's always kind of the family man caring.
Aware of everyone.
Yes.
I love
He's
that.
the glue.
And
the glue guy.
The glue
And
guy.
when the Smiths are literally kicked out of their house, and Hyrum was living in that small, you've probably all seen it, the one that's half-story cabin there in Palmyra. Hyrum and Jerusha, his wife, have children of their own, but they take into their home Joseph Smith Sr., mom, 5 siblings, as well as Oliver Cowdery. And you're
really?
So
why not? At that point, just throw
why
Oliver
not
in
just
there.
everyone?
Yeah.
But I just see him as the family man. I mean, no wonder that when Dad dies, he becomes a patriarch to the church.
I love that.
That's awesome.
Well, I appreciate you so much, and I appreciate you testifying in such a powerful way. and your perspective and your
thanks.
research and your investment in helping hopefully a new generation have the same joy about the restoration that your grandmother gave to you.
I hope so.
I'm glad we have it on tape. I'm glad we have it in your books.
Thanks.
Is there anything in closing you would love the church as a whole to know about your feelings of the restoration, Joseph, Emma, or anything that's coming to mind before we
Thanks.
end?
Well, first I'd want to thank both of you. And for me, I've had a chance to teach religion. I mean, could you imagine being paid for something you choose to do?
I can imagine that.
I can too.
And so, you'd say, well, did you really, do you really work? And I'd be like, it's hard to call it work.
Yeah.
I mean, it's such a part of me. It's such a passion. I guess what I would say is keep the faith. The Lord needs us all. And that, and we need each other in the times in which we live. And that Joseph Smith was a great prophet. The truth has been restored. And, the song, Praise to the Man. Millions shall know Brother Joseph again. I am so grateful to be one of the millions.
That's perfect. Thank you, Susan.
You're
Thank you
welcome.
for your testimony, and thank you for the spirit that you've brought to Real Talk, and sharing your love of Joseph has inspired me for a long time to find more ways to love him and appreciate him. So thank you.
Thank you so much for watching our episode with Susan Easton Black. We're so glad that she was here. We wanted to let you know where you can get more of her. She is amazing and has so much more to give than what you heard. So we have Jesus Christ in the Book of Mormon. This is really about her not only academic pursuit through the Book of Mormon, but also you'll get a lot of her individual stories that have really made a big difference for her.
And then, as we touched on in our episode and conversation, Emma Smith, the glorious truths about Emma Smith. There's some mystery around her, and Susan does a wonderful job in this of talking more and sharing with us a little bit more of the magic behind Emma.
And Hyrum is coming soon. Coming soon to theaters near you.
There's a third cover.
There will
You
be a
can't see
Hyrum.
it yet. Thank you again for joining us today for Real Talk Friends with our special guest, Susan Easton Black. We're so grateful, and we hope that you will specifically share this, especially pre-General Conference, if you're finding it after. I think, as Susan just shared, we all are needed, and this conversion process is daily, and it's so crucial that we keep that testimony alive inside of us, because it will be tested and it's needed. So thank you for joining us, and we'll see you again here soon on Real Talk.